Thank you guys for coming back, and I'll make this kind of quick. Basically, I'm going to talk some inside baseball with you, and quite frankly, if you come to an event like this, you are part of our family. We are all part of an integrated warning team. Those that volunteer in the field like you, those that work in the private sector like us, those that work for the Weather Service like Kevin, those that work in emergency management. I saw Jim Coker here. Jim is the director of the Jefferson County EMA. He was here this morning. So this is just basically some things that we need to work out, and since you're part of our family, I just thought I'd share some of these things today. By the way, I live a weird life. Let me tell you what. If you guys only knew the life I live, one day, this guy's going to wake up and realize he's got me on his body for the rest of his life. Too much alcohol is a bad thing, so we're just going to leave it at that. So I've been around here for a long time. I am as old as dirt. The only guy in this room older than me is Brian. I'm always glad when he's here. I started in Birmingham at Channel 13 in 1979. I was the main weather anchor at a time in my life where I was not qualified to be. My background is electrical engineering. I was an engineering major in college, but yet the path opened up for this. I've been doing this in this market since then, all along, except for a few years in Dallas when I was transferred there. But I'm very thankful to be a part of this generation. I am part of the Theodore Fujita generation. I would sit down at night after the 10 o'clock news back in the late 70s and early 80s and read these preprints from these conferences from Dr. Fujita himself. The men that are my heroes in the science are men like Les Lemon and Chuck Doswell. I feel like they're part of their blood runs through my veins because of all of the material I read. Brian, remember this one? I bet you Brian does. This is what the spotter guide used to look like back in the late 70s. I probably memorized that. I knew it. But these are two men that had a big influence in my life in the science world. The man on the left is a guy named Al Mohler. The guy on the right is a guy named Chuck Doswell. Al died of dementia a few years ago. It was a very horrible way for him to die. But when I moved to Dallas, I met Al, and we became good friends. And a lot of what we know about severe local convective storms today, it's these two guys. Chuck is still around today. If you listen to Weather Brains, he comes on the show. You can't miss the Chuck Doswell episodes. The man is brilliant, but he's a little crazy as a loon, which we probably all are. But anyway, this is my background. And let me just say this. I think for those two men, Chuck and Al, they taught me this when I was young, and I will confirm it's true. And this is true for everybody in this room. I don't care what you do for a living. There will be a day when your cumulative knowledge and experience, and this is good and bad. Everybody in here has good experiences and bad. A lot of you know my story. When I was 7, my father walked away from me and my mom. I'm a fatherless child. He left in the middle of the night, never said goodbye, have a nice life, see you later, is gone. Never paid a dime of child support. I know what it's like to be broke. I know what it's like to hurt. I've been down that path. But let me tell you, the one thing about that experience that pays off for me today, I learned the value of hard work. At the age of 7, I became the man of the house. I am not good at anything I do, but I will work harder than anybody else in this room. And that hard work ethic is paid off. But everything in your life will lead you to 1 or 2 days that will define who you are. And you don't even know that morning when you wake up that will be a defining day in your life. You don't know that's the day. But for me, one of those days in my life came 5 years ago. April 27, 2011. I think most everybody in this room, you probably lived here, or if not, you heard about this event. In our state on that day, we had 62 tornadoes. And this is not unprecedented, but I call it generational. It seems to happen about every 40 years. And in my lifetime, the analog to this was April 3rd, 1974, the super outbreak. I was a senior in high school. They allowed me 3 days away from school to go volunteer with my ham radio gear. That changed my life. The first night, they put me, for some reason, at the People's Hospital in Jasper in the emergency room. The nature of the wounds I saw that night, no 18-year-old child should ever see. I had night terrors for 3 years, but I think for whatever reason, I had to experience that. Prior to 1974, we had an analog event, March 21st, 1932, and I was not doing the weather at that time. Brian was, I was not. Yeah. So understand, this has happened before. It's going to happen again, but it doesn't happen often. So in one day we had 62 tornadoes, and the physical science was pretty good. You look at what Kevin and these guys at the Weather Service did, the warnings were excellent. They were beyond excellent. But the number that I will have in my mind for the rest of my life is 252. Those are the number of people that died. That's inexcusable for anybody in this room. Me, you, or anybody. I thought the death toll that day should have been 30, all right? In 30 cases, people did something right. They did everything they could do, and they were taken. It was their day to die. Everybody in this room, you have an appointed day to be born, and you have a day to die. And it was their day for 30 people, but 222 people ought to be in this long room here with us today, and these were precious people. This is the Coleman tornado, the first tornado of the afternoon. And again, I don't like to watch this on YouTube, and some of you do. That's fine. I don't. But I do think it's part of our history, and sometimes we do have to stop and look at this. I am very thankful that Jason Simpson worked with me on this day. Jason is now in Huntsville at Channel 19, but it was a day where I thought the warning process worked as good as it could work. In this case, it worked pretty well. This came right through the middle of Coleman, and nobody was killed here. Called the hospital, everybody's fine. It worked. People heard the warning. They knew how to get it. And they had a plan. They knew where they were going, and they turned on the TV, and, there it is. They didn't have to, walk outside or look out the window. There it is. We learned that people will react when you show them live video of a tornado. You show them radar, it looks like a bucket of spill paint, and they won't do anything. So in this case, it worked. But later in the day, it just got horrible. This was like bullets from Hades. This is Tuscaloosa. I don't like looking at this. Some of you know my story. When I was in 5th grade, we moved here, me and my mom. And remember, we were broke. People here took in 2 strangers and helped us and loved us and encouraged us. And this is a special place for that reason. And having to watch this on television that day was just horrifying. And understand, when I was on television, I had no time to process the emotion behind this. I didn't have time to think. All day I was reacting. And in a way, I'm glad. We had guys on the ground. John Brown is here. This is John Brown's video and Mike Wilhelm. John is one of the greatest in the country. John, by the way, is in this for the right reason. He doesn't do this for his personal glory or, to get a big name for himself. He does this because John wants to help people. And I really appreciate that about what John and Mike do. And they've been trained. How many years you been trained? When's the first time you came to one of these things? Long time. I mean, he's been trained a long time. And you guys know this. Please don't do this unless you've been trained. I know that some of you in the room have shot some remarkable tornado video, but your life is not worth this. It's really not. So this is coming through Tuscaloosa. By the time it came through Birmingham, you couldn't see it. It was rain wrap. But really, this is all that matters to me. This is all that matters to me. This is Danielle Downs. Danielle was 2 weeks away from graduating at the University of Alabama. She was going to be a social worker. She died that day. This crossed every socio-economic line. I don't care who you are. Your people group, they were affected. Miss Minnie Acklin died when her car was lofted on Interstate 359 in Tuscaloosa. Had lunch with a friend last week in Tuscaloosa who knew her and said she was so precious. But she was driving on Interstate 359 and lost her life. Angel Stillwell was a student over at Piedmont Middle School in Calhoun County. They've had so much tragedy there over the years. Haley and Mikey, they were brother and sister. They attended Concord Elementary School. And, these are schools and places I go all the time. And it's horrifying to this day that they had to experience this. Miss Bessie, people say she had the greatest smile of anybody in Pratt City. And she was killed on that day. Jonathan and Justin Doss, they were brothers that died in Cordova. And let me just say this. One problem we have in the weather enterprise, people that live in rural areas are discriminated against. And we've got to stop that. And that's the one thing I've tried to do at my place over the years. I don't care if there's a tornado warning for a county that's 80 miles away. If you're in my market, my DMA will be on television. But in a lot of these, you go to Atlanta and Dallas, Fort Worth, if there's one coming through, Buckhead, or if there's one coming through Midtown Atlanta, they'll be on television. The minute it gets out of the metro, they're gone back to Freak of the Week or whatever people watch on television. That's insane. And the same thing in these big, what is the matter with these people? I just don't understand that. Al and Angie Sanders, just a few minutes ago, I heard from their daughter. Al and Angie and their 3 daughters live in Shoal Creek Valley. I bet you don't even know where that is. It's near Asheville in St. Clair County. All 5 were gathered together, and they heard the warning, and they got into the middle of the house in a small room. Al and Angie were killed, but the 3 girls survived. And they were hurt pretty badly. One of the young ladies, one of the girls, was in a coma for 3 months, 26 broken bones. It was a miracle that she lived. And she recently was married a few years ago, and she just has a newborn child. She's never told her story. She just agreed to go on camera and tell her story. I can't wait to hear her story. And it's not about necessarily the negative, but the positives, the survival stories, and about celebrating the life of Al and Angie. But they were just fantastic parents. Cassie left behind a husband and a newborn. This is Ashley Harrison. She was 2 weeks away from graduating at the University of Alabama. Her boyfriend was Carson Tinker. He was the long snapper on the University of Alabama football team. I could go on and on and on. But this is where Ashley's body was found, in Tuscaloosa. I spoke a few days ago in Tuscaloosa and met a man who lives in this neighborhood. This is around the Downs, behind the old Tuscaloosa High, behind Central High. It was Tuscaloosa High when I went there. And her body was found here. Understand, the way people lose their life, it's horrific. You're often lofted, and you lose your life when you're aloft. This is where her body was found. This memorial is going to be there forever. But when her parents accepted her graduation later that year, let me tell you something. All I see, it's the pain in Mrs. Harrison's eyes. I want everybody in here to see the pain in her eyes. You can feel it. It is visceral. This is all I think about. And I hope that you get that image in your mind when you help us make this process better. We've got to be better. We've got to be better. There have been too many funerals on my watch, and there's been too much pain like that. And I would imagine most of you in here have no idea what kind of pain she's feeling. And I would like to meet her one day. So when I go on TV and cut off your program, I'm sorry, I don't care. I really don't care. You can get mad at me. I don't care what you do, all right? And I am thankful for the support, but listen, I go down here in the car show, they'll be booing and throwing things, all right? This is an example of this is some of the nice ones. So last Thursday night, we had to cut off Grey's Anatomy, or I don't know what night these shows. I don't watch TV, which is weird. I don't watch TV. I work for a TV station. So, the tweet storm, they come fast and furious, all right? Hope you all turn off this crappy weather off. It's time for Grey's and Scandal. It's not even raining in the viewing area. What an idiot. What an absolute idiot. Excuse my language, all right? This is the stuff I deal with. Who cares about weather? I just want to watch Grey's. This is the society we live in right here. And you ought to walk a mile in my shoes. I had to cut off an NBA basketball on Christmas Day. The first email I got, it said, you should have been aborted by a coat hanger. This is what we deal with. Here's the thing. I stay ahead of the haters. I'll take them on. You might not know what to do with them. I know what to do with them, all right? If you stay ahead of these guys, the trolls, the haters, and the know-it-alls, you'll win. I get ahead of them. I mean, you watch me on TV, I might spend 30 seconds talking to these idiots, and it's a shame I have to spend 30 seconds talking to these people. But anyway, I'm driven by the pain you saw on Mrs. Harrison's face, all right? I encourage you to read this book about this day, What Stands in a Storm by Kim Cross. She did a very good job. She got the science right. Most writers that come in that can tell stories don't get it right. She got it right, and she told the story in a very graphic way of many of those that survived, many of those that didn't, and many of us in the weather enterprise. So it's a great read. I encourage you to get that book, all right? What Stands in a Storm by Kim Cross. So what do we have here? I bet you I'm the only guy in this room old enough to remember the movie called Cool Hand Luke, all right? What we have here is a failure to communicate. The physical science could not have been better. And yet all these people died. So, as Kevin said, we got a problem. My background, it is engineering and meteorology. I was in engineering, transferred to meteorology. I've never taken a single class and being some TV man, doing talks at the spotter training, or I don't know anything about human behavior. I know nothing about social science, nothing, and that's a shortfall. And we've got to fix that, so we turn to them for help, and they have been very gracious to help us. And we've learned a lot, but we got a lot of work to do. And let me just say this up front, and I hate to... I don't want to sound mean when I say this, but I have learned there is a subset of humanity that will not take responsibility for anything. I can't help them. Unless a government official drags them out of the house, puts them in a government bunker, they will claim that they got no warning. I can't help them. I've got to focus on the ones that want help, the ones that will take responsibility, the ones that want to work with us, and that's what I'm trying to do. And when it comes to this loss of life, we do know that on April 27th, some people lost their life that really didn't care about anything. They would not take responsibility. That's a very small number, but there were a few on that day. So what we're going to do is just talk about some random thoughts. And again, this is all internal, all right? This is not designed for Joe Q Public. I've been talking about this at conferences. I was at Mississippi State University last Saturday. I was at the University of South Alabama last month. But the one thing I think that we all have to understand is that everybody's in the communication business. A lot of you young people in the room might want to work for the Weather Service, and you think, well, I don't have to worry about being a communicator. Oh, yes, you do. If you look at the Weather Service social media pages, like they've got... This says 78,000. I think they're about 100,000 now. You are in the mass communication business no matter what you do. We've all got to learn how to communicate. And that includes us. Even though maybe I've been on television for 30-something years, we've still got to learn how to communicate. All these boundaries we have make no sense to the people. You know, we have boundaries in television called DMA, Designated Market Area. My boundaries stop, in theory, at Calhoun and Clay counties. Anybody here from Randolph County or Cleburne County? Places like Heflin, Wadowee, and Randolph. You know what county they're in, what TV county they're in? Atlanta, Georgia. You think those guys at WSB are going to lift one finger to cut off Grey's Anatomy when there's a tornado warning for those two counties? And I know Glenn Burns very well. He's a good friend. I'm speaking at their conference again this year in May. They have over there. But they won't. And we've got to get past these stinking boundaries. This is stuff from the 60s and 70s. With the technology we have today, it makes no sense. And the same thing for these crazy Weather Service boundaries. Cullman County is going to drive me crazy. Anybody here from Cullman County? So here's the problem. So Cullman County is in the Huntsville Weather Service CWA. So everybody in Cullman County thinks that the weather comes from Huntsville. So they send me notes. Well, we can't see Huntsville TV on Huntsville television, so we can't watch the weather. Thinking that you have to, it's got nothing to do with television. That's an example of this mass confusion we have. And you got Winston and Blunt, they're in Birmingham, and Cullman sticks out like a thumb, and they're in Huntsville. I can't use the Birmingham graphics publicly because Cullman is not in the Birmingham graphics set. And we're working to fix this. What I'm trying to tell all of you, these are problems we know about and we're working to fix. We're working together as a weather enterprise. Hopefully this stuff won't be a problem in a few years. But what I'm asking folks to do in the weather enterprise is to get on the same page. Anybody know what this is? And if you don't, I encourage you to learn this. The Storm Prediction Center, the men and women that work there, they are our Army Rangers. They are our Navy SEALs. They are the brightest we have in the science, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to operational meteorology and severe local convective storms. I've spent some time this year with Rich Thompson, who's brilliant. We've had the chance to share some time together at 2 conferences. But if you look at Rich Thompson and John Hart and what these men and women are doing out there, it's stunning, the research that's coming out, all right? But every day they have products. Every morning, doesn't matter if we have storms or not, they will have products concerning the possibility of severe convection. And this is the scale that they have adopted based on social science, all right? It might not be perfect, but it's what we have, all right? You know, marginal is the darker green. That's the lowest end severe weather risk. The standard risk is slight, and I don't like that word. Most people hear slight and they think nothing's going to happen. That's far from the truth. That's when a lot of things happen. The higher end risks are enhanced, moderate, and high. This is on the Storm Prediction Center site. You can see this anytime. Almost all the TV stations use it, and it's what we have worked so hard for years on getting people to understand. Let me tell you something. This is the outlook they put out for the April 27th event the day before. You could not have drawn that any better if you knew what happened. If I had a map of the tornadoes that actually occurred, I couldn't draw a map that good. That's how good these guys are. And again, this is a high risk. High risks are very rare. Surrounding that, you had a moderate risk. Surrounding that, you had the enhanced and marginal. But that's how good this stuff is, all right? So now the problem is, and Kevin, are you still here? Yeah. So and I'm not knocking these guys, but they've come up with their own set of graphics based on impact, which is different than what the SPC graphics are for. They're different, but yet people see them together, and it's leading to some confusion. And this is based on social science. What you got over here, this is based on social science. This is based on social science. But people don't care about any of this stuff. They see those two maps, and they are all very public. There is no such thing as privacy in weather products. Used to be the Storm Prediction Center. They were kind of in the background. Now they're like rock stars, all right? If I brought in, Thompson and Hart, man, it'd be like, Hall and Oates or something. Man, these are like rock stars. So what's the difference in these maps? So what happens, people in Birmingham say, well, the map you're showing is got us in yellow, and the map they're showing's got us in orange. And I don't understand. In fact, here's a classic tweet, and I deal with this all the time. And the greatest limiting factor in my life is time. I regret to this day, most days, I don't have time to think, and that's dangerous. I'm like a pinball in a pinball machine. If you know me, I'm up before 5. I don't get home until midnight, and I've got something every minute of the day, and I'm afraid I've gotten so busy where I can't think anymore, and I don't like that. But I don't have time to waste on this. The tweet up here says, updates posted at about the same time. One says elevated risk and extends all the way to the Auburn. Confusing is that word right there, and that's the word we hear over and over, and we have to work together as a weather enterprise to eliminate confusion, because confusion, it's going to kill more people. And the bottom line is, like I said to start with, there have been too many funerals on my watch. And we've got to work together. And we are. I'm just pointing out problems that I have pointed out many times over the years, the last few years, and we're all working together. Anybody know what this is? Let's see if we got any real weather geeks in here. What is this, sir? He's looking at the title. He's cheating.
Tornado parameter.
Yeah, significant tornado parameter. STP, SIGTOR. Developed by Thompson and Hart at SPC. This is a tornado index. It's really open-ended on the high end. On April 27th, it exceeded 10. This is our standard we have in the Weather Enterprise, and it works very well. You want to know how sausage is made? I'll show you, all right? It is open. You can see that. Anybody can see this. I'm a math guy. I know how this works. I know how it's made. I know their intent. It's fantastic. It's worked for years. So all of a sudden, here comes these guys with this. Are you kidding me? Listen. This is where I need the duct tape so my head won't explode. And look, hey, I have many friends that work for the Weather Channel. I think it serves a good purpose. I really do. Kentori is a good friend of mine. Forbes, and I don't even know if Greg came, I don't know who started this. This is not a knock on anybody. And I will say this for the Weather Channel, they allowed me to come on their show that Marshall Shepard hosts and say anything I wanted to say. And trust me, I had a lot to say about this, all right? They'll never invite me back, but at least they gave me one opportunity to say something about this. So, and so they've got this DEF CON thing. So and then people say, well, what's wrong with that? I think it's sweet. It's nice. It's a number. So here's the problem. So I've got a DEF CON of 7. They got one of 5. Brian's got one of 3. Megan's got one of 1. Jerry Tracy's got one of 6. JP Dice has one of 4. Everybody has these numbers, and it's mass chaos and confusion. There is no room for proprietary indices in the Weather Enterprise. This is idiotic, and again, I'm wasting time I don't have. Every day there's a severe weather day. What's that Torcon for today, James? Don't ask me that, or you'll send me into orbit, all right? There's no such thing. There's no such meteorological parameter. Look at it. Look at the STP. You can see the STP on the SPC site anytime you want to. Anytime you want to see it, it's there. It is there. But this stuff, we've got to get away from it, all right? And I don't even want to get about talking about winter storm names today. This is just... So let's go to a prime tornado market. And again, I know this guy. His name. You want to see a weird Weather Brains episode? 404. We had Mike on show 4. That was the most bizarre 90 minutes of media I have ever done in my life. We had Mike Morgan on after the El Reno tornado. And we just wanted him to tell a story. I thought we were going to be nice. I mean, he came out in a very odd mode on that show. But so you go to Oklahoma City and everybody's got something. And let me just say, the TV guys are a whole lot worse than the Weather Service guys. I showed that example of these confusing graphs. The TV's a disaster. So you turn on to Channel 4 here, and they got 5 out of 10. I have no idea what that means. And then now he's got a max strength of F3. Last time I checked, we abandoned the F scale 10 years ago for the EF scale. Now we step back in time. This makes no sense at all. And on top of that, now they're throwing graphics that look like this. Power failure potential. How in the world can you quantify that? So some guy right here's power's going out and his isn't. I mean, I'd like to see the verification stats on that. If it works, I'll buy into it, but I dare you to bring some verification into this thing. This is insane. We're not that good. We make all this stuff, and people say, well, people want to hear it. They love to see this. Well, what if there's no skill? People want a machine where they can hit a button and the sun comes out every day, you know, but it's a scam. There are things we don't know, and there's things we can't do. I sound cranky, don't I? Wow. I just noticed the meters were pegged on the... Let's be quieter and calmer. This is, yes, the National Public Radio voice now. This is the problem we have, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to do something to fix all of this. We got to focus on winter storms. Listen, I'm embarrassed by this. It was horrible. This was horrible. Shame on me. Forget pointing fingers at Mike Morgan and all this other stuff. This is on me. And yeah, the people in the Weather Enterprise, but this was very, very bad. We had a couple inches of snow, and this was a humanitarian crisis. And we've got to learn to communicate uncertainty better, and we've got to stop saying things that we don't know anything about. I think the one thing you might never hear me say again is we don't expect driving problems. I am not a highway engineer, okay? I'm not. What happened on this day, it was so cold. I've been doing this as long as Country Boy Eddie's been on television here. I mean, it's just... And in all my 37 years, we have not had an accumulating snow event at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The ice accretion process, it is radically different. I didn't know that. We had a little bit of melting when the snow started. And I was going to speak to a school in Tuscaloosa County at Northside Middle School, like I do every day. And I stopped at that rest stop near the Mercedes plant, and I saw this and pictures of wrecks from Northport. And again, I didn't have time to think. All I could do was react. I had to turn around and go back. And I made it within a mile. I only had to walk a mile. I'm blessed. Some of you had to walk 10 miles, all right? But what happened, we had some melting. It had been warmed in the days prior to this, and we had some melting, and then we had like basically a flash freeze. I have no experience with that, none. And it created a coating of ice like a crippling ice storm. You had people down here that were running out of gas, getting cold and hungry. They were burning anything they could burn to stay warm. People needed medicine. This was a true crisis. 5 people died. And let me tell you something. I talk about trolls, haters, and know-it-alls. That's not the same as constructive criticism. I apologized the next day. That's all I could do. One thing about me, good, bad, whatever, I'm a straight shooter. I will shoot straight with you. And if I need to apologize, some people in the Weather Enterprise got all, ooh, you shouldn't do that. For some reason, a lot of these weather people are like narcissists. Think that we can't do anything wrong. This is insane. There's so much we don't know. They've become delusional. They didn't like this apology, but I put an email. This is not a hate mail. This is not. This is sincere. And I need to read that. I need to read this every single day, as does every weather person, all right? It says, looks like you got it wrong yesterday with your prediction of a light dusting and no accumulation. How can you guys be so badly off as hundreds sit in their schools and hundreds remain in their cars on highways, and no telling how many have had to leave their cars stranded and knock on strangers' doors for shelter while others have paid the ultimate price trying to drive. How can you be so wrong? Has everything with your career over the past few years gone to your head? You're expected to be vigilant and not complacent. What a shame as I think of the people still out there and the ones who are dead. This is hard to read, but I need to read that every day. This is not hate mail. This is not a troll. This is not a know-it-all. This is a sincere bit of constructive criticism, and we've got to be better and when it comes to forecasting impacts in winter storms as well. But what we all have to do, everybody in here, is have the heart of a servant's heart. It is easy to get hung up in this business where you think you're something special or you're never wrong or the science is settled and we know everything. We don't know everything. And for those people in the chase community, and I don't even like to use that word, everybody's a chaser. Everybody I know is a chaser. I'm a chaser. Kids, I want to be a chaser when I grow up. Well, you're going to lose a whole lot of money doing that because you don't make any money. You got to pay all this gas and all this. But to do what you do, you have to have a servant's heart. And by being here, you do, because you've given up a big part of your Saturday to come down here. And I'm thankful for that. And for those of us in the weather enterprise, we need a whole lot less pride and more humility. The greatest thing missing in my science, it's humility. And I want you to know that I'm cognizant of that. And I think everybody, most of us are, and we're going to work on that. So, I don't even want to go down this path. My time's up. Do I need to go down this path? Yes. So we had a tornado in Pickens County. These guys did a great job. Great job. Warnings were unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. How many people got in that little storm shelter in the saps? I bet y'all never been to Pickens County, have you? Y'all don't get out much. I get out. Saps is on the other side of Aliceville. That thing could have killed 30 or 50 people easily. And they heard the warning. They got into a safe place and they're fine. So you turn on the news that night and this guy comes on and says, tornadoes strike Alabama without warning. What's the matter with this guy? That's not true. This is just insane. So here's a screen grab. Here's the polygon. They had warning about 32 or 3 minutes, I think, in advance. It doesn't get any better than that, but yet the guy at NBC says it struck without warning, and everybody says, ooh, you can't say anything to them. You might offend somebody or hurt somebody's feelings. Well, so what? They've discredited the whole process. People are going to see this guy, and they're going to think, well, the warnings never work, so I'm just not going to listen to any of them. I will fight these guys until the day I die to keep credit with this program that we're doing. I don't care about right or wrong or me. I'm caring about credibility of warnings. And it's not just this NBC network. I had a problem with her a few years ago. And again, these are probably, look, they don't know anything about tornadoes. Are you kidding? They live in Los Angeles or New York or wherever. They find us offensive, I'm sure. Little peons down here, they ain't got no electricity and we're in bare feet. They don't care about us. And I'm really going down a wrong hole with this. What's the matter? No, I'm not. No. So you see, they know the truth. I don't sleep during the week. Mondays, I'm really fresh and nice and courteous, and Fridays and Saturdays, I haven't had much sleep. Same thing happened with a clay tornado up here, January 23rd of 2012. Christina Heichelbeck died. I can see her, I can close my eyes and see her face. But there was an excellent warnings. These guys did a great job. And she got on the air and she says, rare Alabama tornado strikes with no warning. So the next day it got out of hand on the social media side. I don't know who comes up. It's the same guys. All I did was I challenged this other guy, Holt. I said, you say there was no warning. I say there was. Let's debate. I'll come on your show. You can come on mine. And, of course, you don't hear anything from them. But I will say this. At least they responded, and they came back the next night and did a story about how good the warnings are. But we've got to defend the system here. And this stuff's out of hand. I mean, I don't even want to go down this road. 11 tornadoes touched down with millions in the path. Now, this is down here in Alabama and Georgia, okay? This has to be the longest track tornadoes in the history of mankind for that many people to be in the path. That's not true. It's just like they're making this stuff up. It gets frustrating. So real quick, I got to stop. The really good part of this is coming up, but I want to encourage us in the weather enterprise to fix this severe weather risk area. We've got to fix this, okay? limited, extreme, marginal, so all these terms and colors, it's out of hand. We got to get on the same page with this. Speaking of colors, it's like, hello, friends. Let's use the same crayon today. It's like kindergarten. I'll say, hey, I got up ranting about this at a big weather convention in Oklahoma last year, and the next day I got with Jim Stefkovich and said, let's all meet, because I'm a hypocrite. I am a big hypocrite unless I do something about it. We met at the Weather Service, and we got the color table from John DeBlock, and to my knowledge, we're all using the same color table. I'm very thankful to work with other really good guys in this city. Yeah, we're competitive, but we're friends. JP and Jerry and Mark and all of us, we're going to work together on this. This is not a problem here. You go to some markets, the guys will not get in the same room with each other, or they won't get in the same room with the Weather Service. This is crazy. We might have some disagreements, but let me tell you what, we're family, and we're going to fix this, and I think we're all using the same colors now. These composite indices, this is insane, guys. And I'll say now, the hip thing, all these TV stations, we're having a weather alert day, a weather warning day, a DEFCON day. I don't like that. Then they came to me wanting me to do the same thing. I said, well, I'm not doing that, but how about if we use the SPC risks and let's do some education? So we're going to do that. We're using the standard. We have to standardize this stuff. But we are talking actively, these call to action messages. Goodness gracious. You go in Oklahoma, one guy, you turn on the TV, he says, you will not survive unless you're underground. You turn on the other channel, get in your car and drive south. And then you turn on the other channel and he says, go into a small room on the lowest floor. What are you supposed to do? You're going to dig a hole or get in your car? Or you're going to go to the bathroom? I mean, it's like, these are smart people, and we can't get on the same page because we're trying to one-up each other. And we get these egos in the way, and it's just bad. And let me tell you, I want to work about 10 more years. In my 10 years, I'm going to be focused on fixing this mess, okay? I'm going to be the trouble instigator guy to try and unite us and get this whole thing fixed, but we got to get the call to action message fixed. And by the way, you don't get in your car and you drive south, all right? The only time you do that is if you're in a mobile home and you've got to drive a short distance to get to a shelter. That is the only time you do that. You never get in a car. That is a death trap. I don't care what that jabroni at Kent State said. That guy's crazy. He's a loon. How many people have died on my watch in cars? Way too many. These are precious people. The Kent State guy, I don't know what he's talking about. You're fine if you're in a small room on the lowest floor at the center away from windows 99% of the time, and you can't worry about those small percentages. You don't have to be underground. And we got to work on these winter storm impact messages. Real quick, and I've got to stop because my time's up. This is my personal email address. You're welcome to hit me up. And I'm on the tweeter, whatever. Skywatchers, Megan will be communicating with you on how we chat. We use a chat room, same room administered by the National Weather Service chat. It's the same group, same server. We have our own spot. The National Weather Service bot is in there. When I'm on TV on that green wall during weather, it's like a lot of traffic, but I'm focused on social media and that chat room with you in it. So anything you have, pictures, whatever, it's important. So thank you guys for letting me share. Brian's going to come up and do now the advanced session. So no, we don't have time. And let me just say, this is the really good stuff. I know we're almost done. I know you want to go to the car show, but I'm telling you, out of all the stuff you've gotten today, this is the really good stuff that will set you apart when it comes to helping us in the severe weather. So hang through this last session, and we'll get you out of here. You're in the car show. So this is the advanced session, and I'm going to leave this video file rolling. And we're going to post all of this on YouTube tomorrow or Monday, and I'll put a link out to the world via social media, so you can watch this again if you want to. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Here's Brian. Thank you, sir.
Remind me not to follow him after lunch and after he's cranky. By the way, I bet you didn't get any lunch, did you? You see. Yeah, you see, I have some kidneys up here, baby. I brought my lunch. I brought my sandwich. I knew if I didn't, I wouldn't get lunch. And as you can tell, I haven't missed many lunches. So, all right, the advanced session is not as organized as the basic. We're going to hit a number of different topics, okay? So we're not going to be quite as an organization as the basic is, but you have the basic. I used to repeat those slides that were the ones of the OU's chase team. I used to repeat those at the start of the advance, but we're not going to repeat those today. But we're going to hit a number of different topics. We're going to talk about downbursts. It's important for you all to know some of the differences. We're going to talk about line structures. As Kevin mentioned, supercells produce about 10%. So there's more tornadoes. Of course, the supercells are going to produce the big ones. But we need to talk about line structures and where you and I need to be looking in line structures. We're going to talk a little more about supercell characteristics. We're going to talk some more about wall cloud characteristics. And we're going to introduce, I already introduced the RFD, the rear flank downdraft, as opposed to the forward flank downdraft. And we're going to talk about the surface wind flow so that if you are at a fixed location or mobile location or whatever, if you're at a location, due to the way the wind is flowing, you may have some information about whether or not things will develop or they won't develop. So we're going to talk about those. All right, let's talk about downbursts. Like I said, we're going to jump around a little bit here. A downburst is defined as a strong downdraft. So it's a downdraft, which includes an outburst of potentially damaging wind at or near the ground. Almost every shower or thunderstorm has somewhat of a downburst, but if it's not damaging, then it doesn't get noticed. Now we subdivide downbursts into a couple of parts. We call macrobursts and microbursts. We deal primarily with micro, but they can be macro, and the difference is the size. A macro burst is greater than 2.5 miles in diameter, and a microburst is going to be less than or equal to 2.5 miles in diameter. Where that number came from, I'm not exactly sure, but the bottom line is we do get a number of the microburst events here. So, and by the way, I need to also apologize for my pointer. I know my laser pointer is not very large, so I'm putting in an invoice with James Spann to get a larger pointer, a big pointer. He's got a big iPad, I can have a big pointer. So we deal with primarily microbursts, and honestly, the damage from a microburst can be a lot like that from a tornado, but there are some very distinct differences. When a downburst occurs, the air is flowing downward. And if that downburst, if the downward moving air encounters higher speeds down low, it can incorporate those into the downburst. And the bottom line is, if a storm is stationary like this one is depicted, it's going to hit the ground. It can't go into the ground. So what does it do? It spreads out evenly all the way around. Problem here, most thunderstorms are moving. So what happens is you end up moving that downburst, you focus it basically in the direction that the thunderstorm was moving. Now you get events, a downburst event that looks like this, and basically what you see here on the screen is a tree that was twisted. Can somebody hit the bottom that says off over there? Yeah, that one. There you go, thank you. So you can see the picture better. This is basically a twisted tree. And I get this, I've gotten this more times than I care to count. I'd be rich if I had a nickel for every time. Well, the trees were twisted off, so it had to be a tornado. No, it didn't. When the wind is blowing in a straight line, a tree is affected differentially. That is, the air motion doesn't affect every part of the tree exactly the same. Now, you blow wind against a wall, and perhaps the force on that wall is pretty uniform. But when you start dealing with trees, you're dealing with trees that have more limbs on one side and less limbs on the other. These limbs are bigger, these limbs are smaller, these limbs got more leaves, these got less leaves. And the bottom line is, what happens is, straight line wind tends to set up a rotation, or tends to set up a vibration within the tree. So what happens is the tree begins to flop back and forth. And I know in this group of weather weenies here, and that's an affectionate term, I know you've seen the Weather Channel video of a hurricane or a tropical storm, and they focus on a stop sign or a school sign, and what is that sign doing? It's sitting there going, yeah, I see lots of hands moving back and forth. It's going like this. It's like, yeah, right, okay? So there's no rotation going on there. It's the sign. What's happening is, in slow motion, the sign is being affected by the wind. So the sign tries to turn to align itself with the wind, but it's hooked to a trunk, the signpost, that wants to stay this way. So the sign goes this way, and the signpost says, oh, no. Yeah, you got to come back this way. And so you've got forces that are counter to one another, and they're fighting each other. I had a wonderful experience being in the National Weather Service. I got to survey a lot of different events. I was able to survey, was part of the survey team for Hurricane Elena. I don't know if you remember Elena. It was in the 80s sometime. I can't remember. 84, okay. I can't remember the years. They all blend together. But Elena came up into the Central Gulf, took a direct right turn, went over to the coast of Florida opposite Clearwater, sat there for 3 days, turned around, came back, and hit Alabama, Northwest Florida, Alabama, and the Mississippi Gulf Coast, okay? So the National Weather Service sent out a team. I was part of that team. We went and we actually found a house. This was fabulous. This guy had built his house, and he took aircraft wiring. I mean, I want to, the kind like in the high tension power lines, the big stuff. He put anchors on front and back of his house, and he ran this wire from one anchor to the other in the back of to make sure the house didn't move. It's like, wow, pretty good. He put up window shutters, okay? Then he opened his mouth, which was a mistake. We were photographing his house because we thought, man, this is really cool. We'll put this in the storm report, the Natural Disaster Survey Team report. We'll put this in there as, good practice. And the guy comes out and he says, yeah, but did you notice the stop sign out there? And we said, yeah, we noticed the stop sign. What did the stop sign do? It was, one of those signs that had flopped like this. This is after the hurricane, of course. And if you look really close, the post had about 4 complete twists in it. So, I know what happened. The sign went around 4 times, okay, causing the post to twist. This is when the guy opened his mouth. He said, yeah, we sat in my front window there, and we watched a tornado sit over that sign and twist it around 4 times. And I said to my partner, and that's not water in his bathtub either. So, what happens is the tree begins to act like that sign. And what happens is this tree vibrated so much that the trunk split and the tree came down. Now, one of the reasons that I know this is if you go that direction just about a quarter of a mile, you encounter Pelham Fire Station number something or other. It might be 2 or 3, I can't remember, or 4, I don't know. Anyway, it's on Valleydale Road. What happened to Pelham Fire Station number 2, we call it number 2, is the wind from this, that caused this, was blowing at the fire station from the front of the fire station. What's at the front of the fire station? Big doors, yes. So, the wind comes up and hits the front of that fire station. It's a brick fire station, by the way. Hits the doors collapse. The air goes inside. Where does the air go now? Well, it goes against the back wall, and then it goes against the side walls, and then it goes against the foundation. What's left? The roof. The roof of fire station number 2 was off in the backyard with one flip, just one flip. It's as if you and I went up there, pulled the roof off, and then tipped it off of the building. Classic straight line wind event, okay? So we get those, and as I said earlier, we want to know about wind damage, but don't worry about whether it was caused by straight line wind or not. Now, when we start looking at tornado versus straight line, there are some definite clues that we can see in the destruction. Now, if that event in Pelham had been a tornado event, the difference would have been the roof probably would not have been in one solid piece. I had one of my colleagues in the Weather Service, we used to call it the chew factor. Because when you have a tornado, it's like a beater, it's rotary, you tend to chew things up a lot. So when you look at the difference between downburst on the right here and tornado on the left, the first difference is convergence versus divergence. Well, what does that mean? Well, right here, the wind is blowing from down here up this direction. So what happens is the wind is blowing pretty much like a current. So the wind is strong in the middle here, and it weakens on both sides. So you tend to get the debris in a divergent pattern. Over here, we have a tornado. So you have a tendency to get the debris it's rotating wind as it's moving. So the bottom line is you get motion of the tornado and the damaging wind. So when the trees fail and buildings fail, they tend to bring the debris back towards the middle of the path. Let me explain something about tornadoes too. If you put a tornado over this, and let's just imagine a circle right here, and let's make things easy so we don't have to do a lot of heavy math. Let's pretend the tornado, it's sitting still. So we've got a circle sitting still. The wind is blowing at 200 miles an hour here, 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 and here. So the wind is blowing at 200 miles an hour, okay? Now, let's introduce motion. And again, to keep the math easy, let's move this tornado at 50 miles an hour. Some interesting things happen. On this side and this side, it's moving this way. On the top and the bottom, the wind speed doesn't change. It's 200 miles an hour. But on this side, you're moving 200 miles an hour and you're adding 50 miles an hour to it. On this side, you're taking 200 miles an hour and you're subtracting 50 miles an hour. So now we've got a tornado moving at 50 miles an hour. It's 200 mile an hour wind, 200 mile an hour wind, 250, 150. You get tremendous differences, and that has an impact on the damage that's caused. In addition to that, with a tornado, it tends to be a very narrow, well-defined track, whereas over on a downburst side, it tends to be broad and diffuse. And a lot of times with trees, you'll see the evidence that the trees are basically in a pretty straight line. It doesn't mean that all the trees fall in the direction of travel of a downburst, but trees will mostly. But if the tree is waving back and forth and it suddenly fails on the backswing, you may find one tree that goes against the wind. That's fine. It happens. The rotation is very visible about the rotation, the vertical axis here, and there's no evidence that there's any rotation here. One of the interesting surveys I had was in Montgomery. A tornado hit what I thought was a tornado, hit an industrial complex. And I'm not an engineer or anything, but the roof of the structure was what they referred to as, not my name, light concrete. I saw a piece of it on the ground and I picked it up. It looked like cement. It looked like concrete. So I was prepared as I leaned down to pick this up that it was going to weigh a ton. And I picked it up and it was more like the weight of styrofoam. So it's like, okay, I understand. It's great insulation material, but it's very light. Now, I had a lot of problems with the media in Montgomery because everybody was claiming this was a tornado. Except from, tell them I'll get it later. The problem was when you got up in the air and you looked down at all this light concrete, it was just like this. There was no evidence of rotation. And if you had rotation, that light material would have blown around in the circle and been deposited differently than if it blew in a straight line. So it went in the record books as a straight line wind event. Supercells, or thunderstorms, there's basically four types. There's the single cell thunderstorm, typically a summer thunderstorm, for example, and they can be severe and non-severe. So they're of both kinds. You can get a multi-cell cluster. That's where you get one large thunderstorm that has kind of different clusters within the thunderstorm that may be at different points in the evolution of that storm, and they can be severe and non-severe. When you get to the line, and we're going to spend a little time talking about this, I used to call it a squall line. I still call it a squall line, but it's I'm going to have trouble with this. It's a it's a QLCS, a quasi-linear, what?
Quasi-linear convective system.
Yeah, QLCS, quasi-linear convective system. Okay, it's a squall line. Okay. And you notice that it can be non-severe and severe. Okay, when you get to the supercell, you notice, though, it's severe. The thing about supercells is we focus on their production of tornadoes. But the honest truth is supercells produce usually all three: straight line wind or damaging wind, hail, and tornadoes. So they're basically the worst, which is why we spend most of our time on it. Now, it's really hard to get your mind around the whole concept of how a tornado begins or how the mesocyclone begins in a thunderstorm. I really appreciate Don Burgess allowing me to use his diagrams because when I saw these, it was kind of like, wow, this really kind of puts it in perspective, and I thought it helps. As I told you earlier, I'm a visual person, so it really helps to be able to see this. But what happens is you have air that's flowing in, the yellow line, that's flowing in and rising up into the main updraft of the supercell. Okay? And because you have air that's not just at a certain altitude, but you have, some air at different altitudes, but it's being affected by wind that helps to create, basically, along a line, it's creating this because down at the ground we have low wind, and up here we have stronger wind. So the stronger wind is helping to put some push up here, but down here we have less, so there's less push, and the bottom line is we're going to get this kind of motion. All right, take that kind of motion now, and let's put it into and rise it up into the updraft, and what happens now? We have counterclockwise circulation within the updraft, or what we refer to as a mesocyclone. So the big thing here is looking at the pre-existing vertical vorticity, and vorticity is a name for circulation or rotate, the tendency of the atmosphere to rotate at the surface. And you've and I forget what the purpose of that diagram was anyway. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you've got this going on, and you get your cell developing, and it moves upward, and it moves upward, and you've got this rotation. Now you've got this over here, and you get a different result. You get multiple rotations, but you get one stronger one that works its way down. Okay? I know it's kind of complicated. What do we look for as meteorologists? We look for how the atmosphere is changing with height, especially in wind speed and wind direction. We're going to look here at 3 columns, single-cell storms, multi-cell storms, and supercells. So kind of focus on just one column at a time, and let me describe what you're seeing, and we'll use this one here. The stick of the wind barb here is pointing in the direction from which the wind is blowing. So this is a south to southwest wind. So it's blowing from this direction towards the north-northeast. We have a long one here, which is 10, and a short one, that's 5. So this is blowing at 15 knots. We have 2 long ones here, so that's 20. We have 4 long ones here. Up here we have a diamond or a triangular-shaped one and 2 long ones. So the triangular-shaped one is 50, the long ones are 20, so that's 70 knots. Okay? Now, let's look at this one. This is the environment for single-cell and multi-cell storms. So a typical summer environment, for example. At the ground, we have a south wind at 15. We go up to 5,000 feet, we have a south-southwest wind at 10. So the wind speed has actually gone down, but the wind direction hasn't changed much. We go up here, and we've got now a little more of maybe a southwesterly wind at 5 knots. So we still haven't changed much. There's just not much change going on. We get up here to 20,000 feet, and now we've come back around to the southeast. We're still at 5. We get up here to 30,000 feet, and we're west-northwest at 10. So the bottom line, what kind of wind directional shear is there? What difference? There's very little until you get way up high. And as it comes to wind speeds, we got 15, 10, 5, 5, 10. So we've got very little change, very little shear. In a multi-cell environment, especially one that can produce a squall line, we have a little bit more organization to it. At the ground, we have a south to southeast wind at 15. We move up to 5,000, and we've got a south-southwest wind, so we've got a little bit of change here, and we're at 20. We go up a little higher, we get almost no directional change. We drop off a little bit in the wind speed. We get up here, we've got a little more directional change. We got 40, a little higher speed. We get up here, we got 70. So we've got a lot of wind speed shear up here, but very little speed shear down here, and there's very little directional shear in any of it. So this is a multi-cell wind environment or a squall line wind environment. We get over to this one, and this is where we get the biggest changes, and these are the things that we try to look for in the environment. We've got a southeast wind at the ground at 20. We get up to 5,000, and we've got nearly a 90-degree change in the wind from southeast to southwest, and we've gone from 20 to 45. So in 5,000 feet, we've changed the wind 90 degrees, and we've changed the speed by nearly doubling it, a little more than doubling. We go up a little higher, and now notice there's not much directional difference. It's a little more, southwesterly. It's still southwesterly, still southwesterly, still southwesterly. But the wind speed has gone up, doubled, but now it's only gone up 5. It's only gone up 10, and now it's gone up another, another 30. So notice that the greatest amount of difference is where? It's down here in the lowest 10,000 feet of the atmosphere where we get the greatest amount of speed difference and directional difference. And it's this overturning of the lowest part of the atmosphere that helps to create that spin in the lower part of the atmosphere that when it's turned up into an updraft, it creates the rotation, the counterclockwise rotation. So in a squall line environment, now remember I talked about supercells earlier, that supercells tend to be isolated by themselves. In a squall line, we're not talking about supercells. We're talking about a number of different thunderstorms, kind of these brown areas that are filled in here. So we've got a number of cells that are part of the squall line, but there's nothing that's really isolated. But there are some cells that can respond to the environment better than others. For example, you get the one at the end of the line down here. This cell, part of the squall line, has no southern neighbor. It has nobody that it's fighting with for available energy, warmth, moisture in the atmosphere. So it's all by itself. This cell, sometimes referred to as tail end Charlie, this cell can often resemble that of a supercell, even though it's part of a squall line. Here's a cell right here, but it's part of the squall line. So it really doesn't have any advantages, and any severe weather is likely to be along the gust front out in front of the thunderstorm. Here we have a break. We have a significant break in the line. The line is pretty much a pretty straight line, but right here we get a break. This storm can also act like a supercell because it's a lot like tail end Charlie. There's enough of a break here that this thunderstorm has no competition to the south and southwest, so it's taking as much of the available energy from the atmosphere that it can. This cell can often be just like this one and take on the characteristics of a supercell. We've got another area up there which is part of the line, and again, the threat of severe weather is in the front, and it's going to be primarily that of damaging wind. If we take a line from A to B here, and draw from A to B and look at what it looks like above, this is what we would see. What's happening is that the air in the front is coming into and rising up on the leading edge of the squall line. So you've got the inflow here, the downdraft is behind. So this is not the kind of structure that a supercell has. A supercell, remember, the downdraft is in the northeast quadrant and the updraft is in the southwest quadrant. The updraft is in the eastern part of the thunderstorm and the downdraft is in the western part. So it's a whole different structure. Now, yes, these cells that are part of the squall line can cause some pretty good damaging wind. But and the problem for us as storm spotters is we're going to have a hard time seeing what's going on. This is an approaching squall line. What do you look for? Beats me. I mean, and if you follow other weather folks on Twitter or you look at Facebook, when we get thunderstorms rolling through, people get some very fantastic pictures of clouds, especially along the leading edges. There's actually a shelf cloud here. It's this area right here, but it's not very dramatic. But I've seen some, especially in the last few years with Twitter, especially people taking pictures, and the shelf clouds are absolutely amazing. I got to move this. Hold on. My memory's not what it used to be, so I can't remember what's coming up. So I cheat. The alternative is not very good, is it? My wife has always told me if I want to run for mayor, it's a sure sign to the grave because she'll kill me. Okay, so there's a squall line. Here's one. Now, this is much more dramatic. I mean, this is very dramatic. And what you're likely to experience here is the shelf cloud, this cloud right here that's pushing out ahead of the thunderstorm. This thing is where the wind is likely to change very dramatically. Probably where we are right now, the wind is probably from our back blowing into the thunderstorm. But we're about to face a huge change. It's probably also very warm air blowing into the thunderstorm. But as soon as this shelf cloud gets over us, we're going to feel the outrush of air, the outflow of air from the downdraft. And as it comes out, the wind direction is going to change 180 degrees from blowing into the screen to blowing out of the screen, and the temperature of the air is going to drop sometimes as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit as the cool air comes at us from that downdraft area. Now, along the shelf, you may want to watch for gustnados. This is where gustnados may occur. And again, gustnados they really straddle the line about whether they're tornadoes or they're not tornadoes, because they are associated with some shear on the leading edge, but they don't have any real height continuity within the area that's they form in. Here's another one, and this one looks a little different than the shelf cloud we just saw. One of the reasons is we're looking into the picture, and basically we're looking along the edge of the shelf cloud here. So what's happening in this picture is the air is moving into and rising up ahead of the downdraft over here, and it's the downdraft air that's spreading out, causing the shelf cloud. So we're actually along the edge looking up into the event. James kind of showed this diagram in a different form a little while ago. I think we've both been influenced by Dr. Fujita, and especially by people like Alan Moeller and Chuck Doswell. What happens with downbursts, and downbursts are very hard to warn for, and I'll show you why here. We have a thunderstorm. Ordinary thunderstorm, part of a line. There could be other thunderstorms, doesn't matter, but it's a thunderstorm. And then all of a sudden, a downburst occurs in this part of the thunderstorm. And that downburst then causes the echo to bulge. So it bows outward. I told you earlier, meteorologists are terribly creative with names. It bows outward, so we call it what? A bow echo. Yeah, we're very creative. Okay, so it becomes a bow echo. As the echo bows, you have a tendency to create cyclonic motion on the north side and anticyclonic motion on the south side. As it bows, and we continue to get additional downbursts, and as those downbursts continue to occur, they continue to make the bow stronger, so we get more of a bow in it, again creating more cyclonic motion on the north side and anticyclonic motion on the south side. And then what happens is it begins to weaken, and we tend to get another echo up here that can also take on impression of a hook echo, and you may get wind, or we may get actually a tornado occurring out here because of the cyclonic motion that we're inducing in this storm out here. In the meantime, the old tail down here dies, and then it basically falls apart, and we may actually see the evolution of another one that does something like that. And here's the problem right here. There's no signature that this is about to occur, that this downburst is about to occur. So as a meteorologist, what happens is on radar, I'm watching carefully. The minute I begin to see this bowing structure, then I want to be issuing severe thunderstorm warnings, because the likelihood of damaging wind is very high. And we had a real great example in Tuscaloosa County of this sort of thing. And we couldn't figure out why we didn't get many reports. We had a good bow echo, and we didn't get too many reports. But as it got into Tuscaloosa, we got more reports, of course, because the population density goes up. And I went down to survey it afterward, and I found out why. One of the first things the downburst did was to take out the power and phone lines. So those poor people that were out there in the rural area, they wanted to report, but they were in the dark, and they had no, this was before cell phones were as popular as they are now. And this is what it looks like on radar. By the way, you could also subtitle this advanced class as "More Radar Than I Care to See in My Entire Life." Okay, but there's the bow. So it is somewhere on the sharpest part of the bow that you're likely to get the wind damage occurring or the downbursts occurring. But again, there's nothing really there that gives a meteorologist anything to really hang his hat or hang a warning on, with the exception that it's bowing. And so right in this area, this is the area that you would want to be warning for. And here's an example. This is a great example. It's from the Midwest, but the shelf cloud is overhead, but the echo is actually bowing out ahead of the shelf cloud. So you're looking down, or you're looking along to the south, along the shelf cloud and the squall line, but that one echo is extending outward. All right, you've seen this diagram already. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little more about supercells and some of those characteristics, and try to get into the rear flank downdraft business here. Supercells, there are three types: classic, what we call low precip, LPs, and high precip, HPs. If we get anything in the southeastern U.S., they're primarily high precip and maybe classic. We get very few low precip. Low precip cells, supercells, are the kind that are very easily identifiable. Yes, I know this one is from the Midwest, but this is an example. There's no precipitation with this supercell. We've got the anvil up here. We've got our rain-free base here. Looks like we've got a large wall cloud, and we've got the beginnings of a tornado development. But where's their precip? There's none. Looks like maybe there's a little virga, a little precip falling in the sky up here, but this is a low precip supercell. We are not going to see many of those in the southeastern U.S. So again, looking at the overall from above, your position tends to be, or where you need to be, is you need to be to the south and to the east. Now let's just imagine that we're underneath the supercell, and it's going to actually just move across us. So let's put ourselves right up here in the northeast corner of my slide here, the upper right corner, and let's let the supercell go over us. What are we going to experience? The first thing is out here, when we're out here ahead of the storm, we're probably, if it's a typical spring, fall, November kind of day, spring or November, we're probably getting a south or a southeast wind. It's probably one of those days where the wind's a little higher, maybe 10 to 15, and you may be getting some gusts to 20, 25. It's nothing severe, but it's certainly, a little blustery kind of day. So the supercell gets closer to us, and we get under, the first thing we get under is the gust front. This is the forward flank downdraft. The air's coming down to the ground and spreading out. So what's going to happen is, as we move under the edge of the gust front, the wind direction that was out of the south or the southeast is going to switch direction, and it's going to blow out of the downdraft area. It might be a westerly wind, or it might be slightly southwesterly. And this was warm out here. We're going to feel the temperature effects of this downdraft, so we're feeling the air cool off. We might get in the gust front, you can get easily 10 degrees, and you might get even more. You might get as much as 20 degrees. I know in the southeastern U.S., I have seen on a regular basis along that gust front, a good 12 to 15 is fairly typical, depending on time of day in part. Then we begin to get into the downdraft area, the forward flank downdraft area, and we're getting into the heavy rain. We go from very light rain to, the frog strangler kind of stuff. You can't see past the hood of your car. Then we may get into an area right here where we're beginning to get rain and hail mixed. So we get a little bit of a mixture. Then we begin to get into an area where it's just hail, and the hail may go from small to large. It may begin to pick up. The hail may quit altogether as we get under the rain-free base area, and we look to our southwest and we see a tornado approaching. The tornado comes by us. We may actually get into some wraparound precip coming around the west or southwest side of this rain-free base area. And then we may get out into this area, and we may actually experience the rear flank downdraft. That is air that's coming from high up in the thunderstorm, but coming down to the ground back here, and it's coming down without precip. There's no rain falling. This is not the classic downdraft. This is the classic downdraft, the forward flank downdraft. This is the rear flank downdraft, okay? And you've already seen this one earlier this morning, but two supercells, one here, one here. The two of them are separated. They have enough separation that this one, the number 1 here, does not know that number 2 exists. We've got the anvil of both of them. We've got the main storm towers, but again, we're too far away to see any of the ground level features. On radar, supercells often look like this. Here is the supercell. It is isolated. It is out away from the line. Now in this example, and this is from the WSR-57 radar, we've got a break in the line right here. This cell may act like a supercell because it doesn't have any neighbors right down here to the south and southeast, so it can do what it wants to with all of this available energy in the atmosphere. This supercell down here may act a lot like that one and like this one because it too has no neighbors down here that will interfere with it. The rest of them are basically going to have the inflow coming into, the downflow coming out of, and so these are going to produce hail and or damaging wind. It's less likely that these will produce any kind of tornadoes. This one, and this one are likely to. And by the way, this is already a hook echo, which on the WSR-57, that was all we got, was hook echoes. All right, now let's move up to a little more modern time. This is a day, this was on the 18th of May, 1995, in the afternoon. What's interesting is, how many supercells do we have? We have 1, we've got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3, and this is our squall line. Squall line's kind of anemic, but we've got 3 supercells. Now, I don't know about those two, but I know more about this one. I do know that at the time this radar image is made, supercells number 1 and 2 were producing tornadoes. Supercell number 3 does not produce a tornado until it gets over here into the eastern part of Limestone County and moves into Madison County. But I have a little detail on this supercell down here. This supercell was producing some hail. All you have to do is ask the the Colbert County Sheriff's deputy that drove out to that cell to check it out. Yes, he had gotten his nice, shiny new sheriff's car 2 days before. He had approximately 500 dents. It chipped the paint and broke out half the windows. The sheriff was quoted in one newspaper as saying, "I just wished I had sent my worst car." So this one is not it's a supercell. It's not producing a tornado, and it doesn't produce a tornado until it gets over into the eastern part of Lauderdale County. I'm sorry, I'm one off. It actually produces the tornado in Limestone County over here and moves into Madison. I'm sorry, this is Lauderdale. My mistake. James will never forgive me. But I do happen to know that there's a great barbecue place right there. Whoops, recovered from that. All right. Now, when we're looking at velocities, supercells, we're looking at the velocities, how the water droplets are moving. And remember, the radar can only see in 2 directions, away from the radar and toward the radar, okay? Anything that's perpendicular to the radar beam is 0. So here we are. I'm going to show you that the radar is down here. So the radar itself is actually down here. So we've got high-speed motion moving away from the radar, and we've got high-speed motion moving towards the radar. This is considered a velocity couplet. Now, it's a little bit big in that when you consider we've got a couple of spots of the highest speed values, and we've only got one spot right here, but the main couplet is right in here. But it's definitely a couplet with the velocities moving in and out side by side. We consider this gate to gate. There's a gate to gate shear here, both in speed and in direction, because this is moving out, this is moving in. This is the highest speed inbound, this is the highest speed outbound. So we have a pretty good couplet going on there. Here is the April 8th, 98. You've already seen this one. Don't have a lot of examples, so I have to sometimes repeat them. But again, we've got our hook echo. We can see the hook. The tornado, if there is one, and there is one, is down here. So here's the hook echo. The mesocyclone is the broad scale rotation out of which the tornado is growing. So the mesocyclone is in this area, and then on radar, this is what we were seeing. And again, the Weather Service has the ability to be able to put 4 images on a screen like this so they can get the continuity. This is the elevation number 1, elevation number 2, elevation number 3, elevation number 4, and you can see we have inbound, outbound, inbound, outbound, inbound, outbound, and inbound, outbound. So we have great continuity. So as a meteorologist, I look at that and I say, yep, I'm pretty sure there's a tornado, but I don't know absolutely positively for sure. And in the case of most supercells, we're going to have some sort of rotation that you're going to see visible in here. And again, we may have the problem that you have a condensation funnel and you have a debris at the ground, but the two don't appear to be connected, but they are, because after all, what color is air? Air is invisible. We can't see it, okay? Here it is now. Again, now we're beginning to see it's being made visible primarily by whatever debris it's picking up in here, but we've got the condensation funnel right there, and then this one moves off. By the way, this is the Cordova tornado from April 27th. And there it goes. Naturally, it has to hide behind the trees. And this is the echo that produced that. Here's our hook right here. And, okay, another thing that we sometimes see in supercells, especially when we get these nice isolated ones, is we may see something above the top of these. This is a lot harder to see in the southeastern U.S. because we simply have many more clouds, but we may see this. As a matter of fact, the tornado I showed you, the Cottondale, the pictures of the Cottondale tornado, one of the Weather Service employees who lived at the time on Shades Crest was looking to the southwest and actually observed the supercell with a small overshooting top. Well, what's an overshooting top? Well, what's happening is the updraft is building up, and it's just so strong that even though it gets up to the anvil level where it technically seems like it ought to quit, the updraft doesn't quit and actually shoots beyond the top of the thunderstorm, and therefore gets the name, again, we're very creative, overshooting top, okay? So very, very creative. Now, Dr. Fujita had a theory that tornadoes occurred when the overshooting top collapsed. Now, that may or may not be true. The big problem is with Dr. Fujita's theory on that is we have very little ways to observe, even with satellites, we have very little way to observe the overshooting top, and then when it collapses, it's even harder to see as it collapses. So he may be right, but as far as being able to give us information for warnings, we're not getting much. Now, we're too far away from this one. This is a supercell. Here's our anvil right here. We're seeing the main storm towers. We've got the updraft coming up and shooting over the top here. And in this case, of course, it's pretty strong and still strong at this point. So it probably, as this began to collapse, it may have produced a tornado. We're still too far away from the ground features to see it. A lot of times in isolated supercells, you may be able to see striations along the edges of the main storm towers, because you have to keep in mind that the updraft is rotating. So you may get some of those. We've got our anvil here, and this is the back shear anvil. Most of the air is flowing up in the updraft and moving out, but some of that air feeds backwards a little bit against the wind, creating this back shear anvil. Here's a great example where, as a storm spotter, you and I would want to be watching because we're in the rain-free base area. We've got our heavy rain over to the north, and we've actually got a beaver's tail, but we don't even have a wall cloud. But the beaver's tail was very identifiable, and if you watched this over a period of time, you saw the clouds actually move into the beaver's tail, this wet air moving into the beaver's tail and rising up into and going into the updraft. Now, this one is showing signs of some real brightness back here, and that's one of the things we look for in the RFD. The rear flank downdraft is often noted by what's called a clear slot. Now, time out. We have to caveat this. It's not like the sky goes clear and you see clear blue sky, okay? What's happening is in the rear flank downdraft, we've got air, high-speed air aloft that is, for some reason, beginning to work its way downward. And as this air is moving downward, it is not being produced by precipitation. It's simply this air that's moving downward. So if you take air at a high altitude, say 50,000 feet, and you measure the temperature, and then you push that down, as you go down, the air temperature of that downdraft will actually increase. Because as the pressure gets higher, the temperature has to get higher. So as you come down, the pressure is getting higher and the temperature gets warmer. So it's not a clear slot in the sense of a clear blue sky. And it's rotating around the back side of the wall cloud. So this is what we're seeing right here, is we're seeing this bright spot, and this is the rear flank downdraft that we're seeing represented here next to the rain-free base. This is an RFD looking more distant view, but we're looking to the northeast as the storm moves away from us, and we're getting this brighter spot here. I'll use this at this point. Here's our wall cloud in here. May have some rotation going on here. We can see our heavy rain here, but I will use this as a good point to point out that the rear flank downdraft is not going to be visible at night because what's happening is as this air is descending, it is reducing the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. It's reducing and evaporating some of the clouds. It's not clearing them out completely, but it is getting rid of some so that on a day when above this we have sunshine, you're getting a brighter spot that actually begins to be quite noticeable. Now the RFD pointers that you need to keep in mind is that the RFD is descending air, but without precipitation. It's located to the west or southwest of the main updraft, generally the mesocyclone or the rain-free base area. The difference in temperature and dew point of the RFD is usually less than 20 degrees, and the RFD tends to be warm. The RFD can be seen, and it's made visible through this reduction in clouds, or what we refer to as a clear slot. The warm RFD is actually more unstable and will actually contribute to either the development of a tornado or the continuation of a tornado that is going on. If the RFD happens to be cold, then the whole process of tornado development is going to be choked off because the mesocyclone does not like this cold air feeding into it from the southwest. So on radar, here's our hook echo here. We can see the hook like this. The RFD is right here, coming right in behind it. It's actually visible, can be visible on radar. So there's some lines we draw on it so that you can see here's the mesocyclone right here. The tornado is probably going to be right here. And here's our rear flank downdraft evaporating some of the echoes as well as the clouds. So the RFD is right in this area right here. And partially what's happening is that some of the air up high is actually encountering this you might call this just a column in the updraft. And if you've ever watched a post in a small stream, have you ever watched how the water responds to that post as the water is going by it? You know, it kind of separates back some distance from the post and goes around it. Well, the air in the atmosphere does that to updrafts as well. So what happens is the air is actually splitting around this huge updraft up here, and at the same time, some of that air may descend down, and when it does, it becomes that descending RFD that will impact the mesocyclone and the development of a tornado. Now, there's still a lot of research going on, and the vortex southeast, one of the things they're looking at is whether or not in the southeastern U.S. the RFD plays as big a role as it does in the plain states. We'll see about that. Again, the RFD is very difficult for you and I to see. Here's an example of one where we've got our heavy precipitation, we've got our wall cloud right here, and we've got our rain-free base. And notice how bright it is back here, and part of that is the rear flank downdraft that's helping to evaporate some of the clouds. Here's another example. We're actually looking north. The rain-free base is overhead. We've got our ragged wall cloud, which would help us determine the rotation, but notice how bright it's getting right in here. This brightness is that RFD that's coming down. Again, you have to have the RFD or you're going to see the RFD only with nighttime. Now, the characteristics of a tornadic wall cloud, some of the things you and I need to look for is that when wall clouds, and that's the backdrop here, when wall clouds appear, they are persistent. That is, wall clouds don't just form and disappear. Form and disappear. This is a process that's going on in the atmosphere, so when they occur, they're going to persist for tens of minutes. So if you see a little chunk of cloud and you think that might be a wall cloud and it disappears in 20 seconds or a minute and a half, it's probably not a real wall cloud because it should be there for a good long time. If rotation is there, the rotation will be persistent. And once again, all the ragged clouds help you to determine that rotation. There should be rapid vertical motion, and you may sense some of that in how the clouds are forming. You may see a little cluster, a little pocket of cloud that forms and moves up very rapidly into the wall cloud. And that's because the air above us here in the wall cloud is rising up into the updraft. So there's lots of upward motion. Again, people refer to that calm before the storm, and if you and I were down at the ground over here, it probably would seem kind of calm because overhead, all this air is moving into, rushing into, and moving up. So we get that rapid vertical motion, and again, with condensation occurring, you may see it in some of the clouds, and there's surface-based inflow. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, if you and I are watching this from this vantage point, and we've got our heavy rain off to the north, if we're watching this, the wind is probably blowing from our back into the wall cloud. That's where the surface-based inflow should be. So what we're going to try to do is through a few diagrams is to present to you how the wind is going to change if you and I were in a good position to be able to see things. And we're going to put ourselves out here just to the southeast of the main updraft. And we're watching what's going on, and we're getting low-level inflow represented, the moist low-level inflow is represented by the orange arrows. The cooler wet air is being represented by the blue, and I don't have another one that indicates the rear flank downdraft in these, but it's okay. It's primarily the cold air and the warm air that we want to try to follow. So we're out here to the southeast, and the air is blowing from our backs into the main updraft, and we're basically in good shape. We're going to advance in time here, and what happens is that we get this good, strong inflow into the main updraft. So the main updraft is getting exactly what it wants. It's getting warm, moist air, this low-level inflow coming into and rising up into the updraft. Condensation is occurring, heat's being released. The main updraft is really happy. It's hunky-dory. Everything is in great shape. The rainy downdraft or the forward flank downdraft is occurring over here, and that's represented by cooler air and blue arrows. We get some of this wrapping around because remember the main updraft is the mesocyclone here, so it's rotating. So we're in great shape, and the supercell may stay like this for some length of time, and then it may change. The supercell that produced what I refer to as the Piedmont tornado, but really should be called the Goshen tornado. That supercell actually began in east central Mississippi, crossed Alabama, crossed Georgia, crossed South Carolina, and finally dissipated around midnight in North Carolina. It was one identifiable thunderstorm, one. And in its lifetime, it produced 5 separate killer tornadoes. It can go, supercells can go through an evolutionary process where it simply repeats itself. As it produces a supercell, the supercell stays consistent and in balance with nature for some length of time, then nature gets out of balance, that one dissipates. To the southeast, another one begins to get into balance, it begins to produce another tornado, that one stays in balance for some length of time, finally dissipates. You get the process going on many, many times. So we're in basically great shape. So if we were to the south and east of our main updraft, we've got air that's blowing from behind us into the updraft. All right, with time, and we're changing the look here a little bit, but with time, we're still over here in the southeast quadrant. We've got this good low-level or they got this good rotation occurring in the updraft. We've got good air coming into the updraft, good warm, moist inflow. We've got this wet air, but it's staying in check, so everything's in great shape. Now, we're going to advance with the help of zooming in. What happens is the tornado begins to occur. The tornado forms, comes down to the ground, and begins to track. But it's getting good, balanced air coming in. It's got good warm inflow. So the updraft continues to stay strong. We're getting that condensation occurring, good release of heat. The cold air is staying at check out here, so everything's in balance. We move on. Now things are beginning to get out of balance, and this could be 10 miles, this could be 50 miles. It's hard to say for sure. But now things are getting out of balance because the updraft that spawned this tornado is not feeding off of the warm, moist air. If we had been to the southeast, we now have cold air coming at us as the tornado has gone by. So now what's happening is the supercell is evolving, same thunderstorm, but it's evolving and we're beginning to get a new updraft developing here. This one is still there, but the updraft is beginning to weaken, so the tornado is going to begin to weaken. So we've got this new one developing that is typically to the east and south of where the old one was. Now we're going to advance a little bit more, and tornadoes often will, at the end of their lives, give a little jerk to the left or to the right, primarily to the left. But now we've got our main updraft over here. Everything is totally out of balance over here. So now all the warm, moist air is feeding into this updraft. This is where the action is likely to occur, and this is where the tornado will be dissipating. Now, what we're going to try to do is to look at a case and throw some lines on here. And this is kind of complicated, but we've got our heavy rain over here. We've got our rain-free base right here. We've got our wall cloud right in here. The air is coming into, the warm, moist air represented by the orange is coming into and rising up into the updraft through the wall cloud. Everything is very hunky-dory. Notice how bright it is over here is because we're getting this air, this rear flank downdraft that's coming down and moving out. If it pushes out too far ahead of the wall cloud and the updraft, then this updraft is going to dissipate. And when it dissipates, then any tornado that might be associated with it will also dissipate. As a storm spotter right now, the air is basically blowing from our backs or kind of over our left shoulder into the wall cloud. We advance in time. The moist air is still feeding into and rising up into the updraft. We've now produced a tornado, but now we're getting this rear flank downdraft pushing out ahead of this warm, moist air, pushing it off to the east a little bit, and the end result is this is going to begin to dissipate, and as it does, and we've taken the arrows off, this is the same one, we've got this rear flank that we can see as a result of the clouds dissipating in here. We've got our wall cloud too, and now this tornado is beginning to dissipate, and over here, we see now, you see the new wall cloud developing right here. Here's the old wall cloud, here's the dissipating tornado. Here's the new wall cloud developing right here. We still have our rain-free base. The rear flank downdraft has pushed out, and now we're getting wind in our face. Instead of from behind us, we're getting air that's moving into our face. I know it's complicated. It really is. It's kind of hard, but sometimes with the wind, you can get a sense of whether things are going to develop more or not. Here's an example of a supercell. This is actually the Piedmont tornado. I'm sorry, I've been saying it for so long, I'll have to stay with the name. But it's the one that produced the Goshen United Methodist Church disaster with the 20 deaths. But here is our supercell right here. Now, one of the things is there is a limitation to Doppler radar as to how far it can see out and get good classic hook echo kinds of images. We're not getting a good hook echo type image with this storm because we're actually 110 miles from the radar that's associated with Maxwell Air Force Base. But what I want to point out here is we're getting another signature that's a very interesting signature, and that is you see that we have the reds and the gold surrounding yellow. So if you go over here to the scale, we have reds and gold, which are high values of reflectivity, surrounding a much lower value, the yellow. The yellow is like 35, being surrounded by 45 to 55. What this is called is a BWIR. BWER. Again, meteorologists are terribly creative. It stands for Bounded Weak Echo Region. What's happening right there is that the updraft is so strong at this elevation that the updraft is pushing the bigger water droplets higher in here than it is around it. So the updraft is extremely intense and creating this bounded weak echo region. Now, we did have, this was one of the first, it was in its early infancy of the Doppler radar in Alabama, and we did have this image, which shows the outbound. The radar's down here, so the radar beam's coming out this way. We've got the outbound velocities right here, represented by essentially pink values, and then over here we have the bright greens and the cyan moving in. So we've got this velocity couplet right here, and underneath that, at the time this radar image was made, this is what was occurring. And the two are within plus or minus 2 minutes. We spoke with the gentleman who took this picture. I still run into him from time to time when I'm up in the northeast part of Alabama. What happened was he was at his grandfather's house, which is actually right behind us. It's a mobile home. And they were there for a birthday party, so he happened to have his camera. They realized the tornado was approaching, and so this is the air vent that is for the underground storm shelter that his grandfather had installed when they put the mobile home on the lot here. So they left the mobile home and went down the stairs, and as he was the last one in, he remembered he had his camera. He flips the camera up and he shoots this picture. Then he closes the lid and they wait downstairs to the tornado to destroy their place. Well, it turns out, and by the way, we went to this spot, and based on triangulation, the church at Goshen is being destroyed as he took this picture. It turns out, this was actually the Jeff Formby's house. It turns out the tornado actually passed about 1 mile north of his house. So it did not affect them. I mean, they were pretty close. This shot, by the way, that tornado is about 3 miles away. But what was interesting was they were helping friends and family with all of the damage and destruction that had gone on, and he really forgot about his pictures. 2 weeks later, he was at Walmart flipping through the pictures, and he flipped through, and this one popped out. It appeared then in the Anniston Star, and after it appeared in the Anniston Star, I raced over on I-20 and found out where Jeff lived, and I looked him up and I said, please sir, let me have permission to use your picture because it's the best picture of an EF4 tornado in the southeastern U.S. I've ever seen. Now, this is also a great picture to illustrate to you how people can be fooled with what's going on. The tornado is obviously right here, but what's this? Well, I had a number of people tell me that there were multiple tornadoes. And I understand why they would think that. There is also video that exists of this tornado. It's only about 2 minutes long or so, 3 minutes maybe max. And it was taken from a greater distance, unfortunately. But what the video shows is that the tornado without this thing is like this wide. And then suddenly on the video, the tornado will just magically will suddenly increase in size by twice. And what I think is happening is there's so much moisture and warm air feeding into this thing that what happens is you begin to get a little more lift on the front side. So what's happening is the condensation funnel appears to actually double in size. But when you watch the video, the doubling occurs, and then you see on the front side, you see this cloud rise up and rotate into the rotation. So the bottom line is, the tornado was not doubling in size. The condensation funnel appeared to be doubling in size, and on the video, it actually happens 3 different times, one right after the other. So I'm pretty sure that that's what's happening. But I can understand completely, after seeing this, I understand exactly why people reported multiple vortex. All right. I just want to remind you of this diagram and to mention that if you didn't get the basic, I'll put it up, but this is a URL, and this one is correct, at least it was last night. Okay? This is the URL to the Advanced Storm Spotters Guide, and it is in a different location than what the other one was, okay? It's www.weather.gov/media/top, I don't know where that comes from, /ADV_spotters.pdf. And if you need the other one, I can put the other one up there. So, I'm not sure exactly what time it is. Oh, yes, it's 2:14. So, I'm close. I'm 15 minutes over. You'll have to dock my pay. You can't. It's already so low you can't do that. Okay. I know it's been a long day. I really thank you very much for coming. I can't believe there are as many as 400 crazy people that are willing to come in and spend all day with us here. But we do appreciate it, and when the chips are down, we know you'll be reporting. I honestly hope and pray that you never have to use this information. I really hope that none of you ever have to, but just remember, we need your reports very much. I'll be glad to try to stick around or answer questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, I'll be glad to do it. So, or you can ask him. Or you can ask him a question and let me answer. Okay. With that, I'm very interested in the Chevy Tahoe, but I cannot afford $72,000, so I have a little pot up here if you want to contribute.